Hello and welcome to the One Lone Coder Community Showcase 2019. It's that time of year, and what a year it's been for the channel, where we get to see what a selection of your projects look like. As usual, I've only included a handful of projects and I'm terribly sorry if yours hasn't been included. But I hope to address that next year with more frequent but shorter Community Showcase segments. So let's get started with Tiskin here and his project investigating hydraulic erosion simulations. And it started off very simply. Then started to add some basic particle physics to emulate the water travelling down the mountainside. As the water moves, it erodes the surface underneath it, therefore encouraging the water to follow a particular path later on. The next phase of the simulation was to add some depth to the water and make it interactive. This is always a good thing to do because playing with your simulations allows you to get an intuitive understanding of how they should function. And you also get to learn what the limitations are. Sometimes it doesn't always go well. And once you've got a basic simulation with a user interface, you can start to really press that simulation to find out what it is truly capable of doing. Now you can simulate large-scale things. It's time to see, is it that accurate? And Tiskin struggled a little bit trying to get realistic behaviour, but by doing this, he understands how to fix the problems. And eventually came up with what he calls a tsunami simulator, where he can draw water onto this terrain and watch how it behaves and crashes upon the rocks. I really like the detail in the surface of the water. Although probably quite computationally intensive, I think the effect would be quite useful in a simulation for a thesis or a scientific study of some sort. So good job, Tiskin. Hydraulic erosion was quite popular, and so Magetsub also had a go. This is done in the Pixel game engine, and we can see different terrains being randomly generated and then a certain volume of water deposited on the surface. As the water travels, it erodes the surface underneath. Magetsub also created this really cool utility. It allows you to explore image processing in real time using the pixel shaders on your graphics card, and it also uses the webcam as an input source to those algorithms. So here I've got a very simple shader which just grabs the source image and displays it, and it's upside down, and I'm leaving it upside down in the video rather than just adjusting the coordinate to remind Magetsub to fix this bug, as I have done many times. But the really nice part about this application is you can alter your shader code in real time. So if you think back to my 8 bits of image processing video, I showed how to do temporal filtering, where we take the previous frame and the current frame and subtract them with a little bit of maths in between. So there we go, and all I need to do is save the algorithm and it's immediately applied to the graphics card to compute. So in this case we start getting these ghostly images. And I think these sort of things are a really great way to learn. Let's just reduce the time constant on that. So if I do save, there we go, it's a little bit more responsive now. I think these are great ways to really learn how to do image processing. If you can interact with it and you can wave at it, it's just a really intuitive way to understand how to perform these tasks. It surprised me just how much I enjoyed playing with this, and I got a little bit carried away because I used to do a little bit of image processing back in the day, and I ended up creating this shader which makes me look like I live in the Borderlands universe. One of the best parts about the Discord server is seeing the evolution of people's projects, and also getting to see that fads and trends take hold. And this year in particular, there's been a bit of a trend towards people developing node-based circuit simulators. So this one by Bobby shows Bobby constructing a circuit out of, well, arbitrary components and investigating the functionality. I think for Bobby this has also been a trial in user interface design. As the project progressed, it became more sophisticated. And very quickly, Bobby was constructing quite large logic circuits and looking at their behaviour. Here's an example of a full adder. Gorbit99 has also implemented a logic simulator. I understand Gorbit has just started university learning electronics and electrical engineering. There's scaling and placement of components. And all of these node-based interfaces seem to follow this common idea, that you can attach components together via these curvy lines, or splines. Gorbit has continued to develop the simulator to consist of a library of parts. I guess this approach is much simpler than doing the truth tables and the Karnoff maps by hand, so it's a great way to get through that coursework very quickly, and I'm a great advocate of using code to learn about new subjects. Cobalt 12 here has also created an electrical circuit simulator. You can choose the components from a menu, and you can change their temporal properties. Very similar looking components to the others, but quite functional and usable. Good job, guys. It tickles me that in all of these instances, the aesthetics of the user interface have been given quite a high priority. Diego here has used a node-based interface to simulate a different type of circuit, a synthesizer circuit, complete with appreciators, samplers, step sequencers, the whole lot. It sounds wonderful. Now, if you've just randomly sampled videos on the channel this year, it's very likely you've seen something about a NES emulator, because I know I've made quite a few of them. But what's been really inspiring is actually seeing the community think, well, I'm going to have a go too. And indeed they did, with remarkable results. The great thing about the OLC community is the diverse range of abilities, and nobody will get criticised for making things that don't work according to plan. As long as they're having it a go and they're learning something, then that's wonderful. And here is Cardboard Guru's early stages of his NES emulator. WoodyRed has also started to implement an emulator, and you can see it looks a little bit familiar from the video series, but he's got it working up to Super Mario Bros. 3 so far. Well, not quite, there's a few things not working here, particularly it looks like the scanline interrupt counter on the mapping circuit isn't working very well. However, Mario 3 is running, and that for me was a personal benchmark. Good job, Woody. Here's Atomizer Zero's attempt at an emulator, and it's interesting to see that even though the emulation looks like it's working well, the curious bugs that you get when you just get the smallest things wrong. This was Powie's emulator, and now I know he's put a lot of effort into getting this working, certainly a very active member on the Discord server, but yet again got Super Mario Bros. 3 working. Well done. This is Gabros's emulator. It's got it working as far as sound. It looks like the speed is a little quick, but nonetheless I like the fact that you can see the name tables being developed. That was something I never bothered to do in the video series, but often felt that I should have done. And here's JStyles154 emulator based in the browser, up and running with Zelda. Doesn't look like it's entirely finished yet, but nonetheless Zelda is a good benchmark. Lockathor here has just started on his emulator. It looks like we can step through the code. He's prepared it ready for showing all of the internals. Now, some people look at an emulator and go, yep, that took Javid 3 months, it's going to take me 3 days. And these are people like Tordok, a very functional emulator indeed. Now, one guy that's particularly active on the server is Bispu. He takes most of my videos and re-implements them in C#, so all of this is a C# emulator. However, he goes well beyond the simple demonstrations I show on the YouTube channel and makes them his own. So here is his NES emulator working no problem at all. He then went further and implemented this rather famous tune on his Arduino. Once you've got a working 6502 emulation, you can use it for other computers that also use that CPU. In this case, this is Bispu's C64 emulator, Commodore 64. And there's nothing better than programming your own emulator to run your own programs running in your own programmed emulator. No, it's something like that. Anyway, good stuff, Bispu, keep doing it. C64 emulators have proven quite popular, and this is Desert Fishes. So we can see it running the C64 operating system, and it's loading up some programs. This looks very stable and smooth. Good job, Desert Fish. Hag here has also implemented a C64 emulator and is programming inside his C64 emulator. It is C64 Emulatorception. The emulator is contained within quite a good user interface too, so you can interact with the disk system. And it runs lots of little programs. Very nice, very realistic. Personally, I'm not a fan of emulating scan lines, because I don't ever remember my television looking like that back in the day. Then again, I am from Europe and we used slightly higher resolutions back then. Those familiar with the channel will have probably picked up on the fact I'm not the biggest fan of games made of cubes. So I was quite intrigued when a couple of months ago a guy came to me and said, hey, I've been watching one of your videos and I wanted to have a go at making this, and consequently sent me a Minecraft world to explore. And so enthusiastically I entered the world and ran towards a button marked Run, which I promptly destroyed. I hate this game. Not to be discouraged, I reloaded the world and remembered to use the right mouse button this time. And not a great deal seemed to happen, so I thought I'd have a look around, and I started to recognise some familiar things. This says Mapper, and there's a big block of, well, mud and rocks up there. Over here we have some signs called Name Table. In fact, we have two of them. And this one's called Palette Table. These are all starting to look very familiar indeed. Here's a lot more signs. This one's Enable NMI, Pattern Background, Pattern Sprites, Increment Mode, Name Table X and Name Table Y. For anybody that's watched the channel this year, you might be familiar with a lot of these terms. They are in fact NES emulation components. And this grid on the floor looks suspiciously like the palette used in the NES. Nothing really seemed to be happening until I started to notice some of these blocks changing colour. And then I discovered this, which indicates there's a binary system of some sort in place. The control system has a button called To View Platform, so I clicked that. And I've sped it up here, but revealed in front of me was something incredibly impressive indeed. Tim ZF has implemented a NES emulator in Minecraft. And here we can see the Donkey Kong ROM working, and certainly we've got a working 6502 simulation, and we've got a PPU simulation. At least it renders the backgrounds. Now, I won't pretend to understand the first thing about building computers in Minecraft, but nonetheless I think this is very, very impressive and shows a very deep level of understanding of how the NES works, plus how Minecraft works. And I can only assume that things like this are the data stored in zeros and ones. So this must be the ROM for the game. Tim ZF has also provided a full breakdown of how the individual components of the emulator work. Here we can see the different registers performing their computations whilst the emulation is taking place. And pixel by pixel, the giant screen reveals itself. I'm going to assume that it's actually rendering the entire viewable frame because the centre seems to be offset to the left, which implies we're looking into the horizontal blanking period at the end of the scan line. Tim ZF, you're nuts. The community around the channel has grown, and it's been an incredibly humbling experience, and I feel really rewarded to get to interact daily with people from all walks of life and all levels of ability. Next up, I want to show some very simple programs but incredibly important programs developed by Speedy C. Now, he has told me and given me permission to say this, Speedy C actually suffers from quite severe disabilities, and so finds using the keyboard and the mouse quite difficult. And he has spent his time developing applications to make his day-to-day life easier, and this is something I am in great admiration of, because he is programming things that are actually useful to him. How many of us can say that? So this is a little label maker that he's using to print labels. It's written in Visual Basic, and it contains the controls that he needs in order to print the things that he needs to put on the devices in his life. It's a very simple programming using lots of built-in utilities provided by Visual Basic, but nonetheless useful.
Adding new message.
Now, because Speedy can't type very quickly, he struggles to partake in the discussions that take place on the server. So he's created a small application that allows him to store pre-made answers which he can use when necessary.
Do you want to delete this message? Deleting message. Saving messages. Creating a backup of all messages. Closing application.
Next up, we've got 2 submissions from Alexander, or Alexander the OLC, on the server. Here we've got an implementation of Snake, and this may seem simple to some of us, but don't forget you had to start somewhere. Not everybody is born with the ability to program games straight away, but I quite like these. They're fully functional games, finished projects of both Snake and Tetris. Well done, Alex, good stuff. In a similar vein, TPD is learning. And here is his implementation of Space Invaders using the Pixel game engine. It's quite noisy. But he went on to then create a good emulation of Pac-Man. I think I might have a go at Pac-Man one day. Now, we can't have a community showcase without showing a console-based first-person shooter, and I really liked this one by Crisis Realms. The attention to detail is lovely. One of the biggest contributors to the server is Lubitech, and he is more interested in developing artworks. He also creates lots of musical pieces too, and I'm quite envious of the guy because he's programming in a way where he's not got a set goal. He's programming and seeing what comes of it. And so I'm just going to leave these visualizations running. I'd love to be able to spend some time just throwing code at a compiler and seeing what happens. It must be a very liberating experience. Now, here's Dannycron using the Pixel game engine, and Dannycron is learning the tools of the trade. This is a Civilization-inspired clicker game, where you click and you build resources, and those resources yield more resources, and you use those resources to buy further resources. You know the deal, it's a cookie clicker game. And this is a small example of Dannycron learning how to perform proper user interactions, controlling a small man moving around the screen. As before, these things are simple but necessary steps in order to become good at your craft. Danny's current project is a terminal emulator. He's interested in multi-user dungeons, and so he's had to write the networking code to connect to the MUD servers, but then also implement the rendering code to display all of the escape sequenced input provided by those servers. And I'm interested in this because next year I think the channel will explore networking in some detail. This year we had OLC Code Jam 2019, and it was a really good competition. We had 64 entries and lots of ratings, and the quality of the entries was very high. The theme was destruction, and we had entries from simple 2D pixel games to full 3D engines and horror experiences. And I've already recorded quite a long stream and uploaded it to the Javid X9 Extra channel, where I was playing the majority of the entries. I'll link to that down below. By quite some margin, the winner was Tetra Wall by Lowcase, which, if this is an original IP, I think is a brilliant idea. You can play the game in the browser, and it's a combination of Arkanoid and Tetris. And it's got this lovely 8-bit feel to it all. So you have to place the Tetris bricks before the ball hits the goal. Let's try that again. So place a brick, and you have to wait for the next one to come along. And you can see the ball will destroy the Tetris bricks that you are placing, so you have to maintain a defense. It's really quite hard. But it was very, very addictive to play, and was a deserving winner of the OLC Code Jam 2019. As with the previous Code Jam, there are also a couple of Judges' Choices Awards, which are the games that I've chosen that particularly caught my interest. This one is called The Last Invader by Gareth Hubball. And it takes the concept of Space Invaders and turns it upside down. It's also created in the Pixel game engine, which of course I'm a fan of. So let's start the game. So this time, instead of being the ship at the bottom, you are the alien and you have to avoid the bullets. It's as hard as nails, but you can't stop playing. You can speed the alien up and down, and you have to see how far you can get. As you can see, I'm not very good at it. Gareth live streamed the development of this, and I've not got beyond the middle of the screen yet, so I've got to try a bit harder. But with a bit of practice and not trying to do a voiceover at the same time as playing it, it is actually possible to get further down the screen. There we go. That's a bit. Oh, got hit again. And it's got some cool music, sound effects, and the scenery is actually destructive. I don't think anybody has ever gotten to the bottom. If you have, create a video and submit it on the Discord server. The second Judge's Choice Award went to Inzy Winky for I'm Done, a game about destroying everything. It's got some plot, but what I quite liked about this was the dual nature of the game. It consisted of two stages. Firstly, you had to defend your tower, and once you'd defended it for long enough, you had to successfully escape Earth's orbit. And here we are on the second stage, and the idea is you have to try and follow the path. You can zoom in and out to see what your objective is. So you've got to travel around the planet, and real physics start to come into play here. I'm not very good at it. I don't want the craft to fall. And when you get to the other side of the planet, you can release the bomb. I liked this entry because it's not often you see a multifaceted game, particularly in a game jam. Gravity simulations also proved quite popular on the Discord this year. Ericsson is our resident Discord physicist, who tries to create titles that really explore the physics behind phenomena in the real world. And so here we've got a simulation of a universe, and I can press tab to go between the planets. Let's let me zoom out a little bit so we can see the whole system. I'm informed there is a craft that I can control around this universe. Let's just zoom in on this system here. I liked the graphics. They're very simple, but they're all vector based. And I can choose between all of the different ships and objects floating around. This planet has a ring and a moon. In fact, it has 3 moons, which is quite nice. One of the perks of being a member of a community such as One Lone Coder is you get to see people start projects, develop them, and occasionally complete them. And this year in particular, a guy called Said30 has been producing some absolutely exquisite programs. And I'd like to show them here as an absolute textbook example of how to develop your projects. The first thing is to get some very basic display up and running. Then start working with a small tile engine. Here we can see the solid tiles. Then get your camera moving. That's an important step for immersion. Then start to add some more advanced features. I really like the debug information being displayed on the screen. Then start to add some more advanced user interface features. So here we've got double jumps and rolling. And finally, bring it all together. So what do you do when you've finished your project? Well, you start it all again. You take the knowledge that you've just learnt from your previous project, remove all of the rubbish that didn't work, keep in all of the bits that you liked and performed well, and do something better this time round. Start at the beginning, get your graphics and user input sorted out. Then sort out your camera. In this case, the camera follows the player smoothly. Next, implement some collision detection. This needs to be quite robust or the player can glitch through things and perhaps perform actions you didn't quite intend. Then start to partition the world sensibly. You don't want to draw everything all the time, nor do you want to interact with absolutely everything. So come up with a data structure that represents your world. Bring the world to life by adding some rudimentary path following. In this case, a small dog that follows the player around. It's these sort of details which really make the game deep. And as before, bring it all together into the final experience. The reason this looks and feels so good is it's the attention to detail. And it's that that takes more time than the programming. I think said 30's contributions this year have been nothing short of remarkable. Well done, said. Well, that's it for the community showcase this year, and I think you'll agree with me that the quality of the submissions has been absolutely superb. If you haven't made it this time, don't worry, we'll do more showcases next year. I want to do them more frequently and with perhaps smaller, shorter episodes. I'd also like to thank all of the people that are frequently posting their project progress on the Discord server. If you're a viewer of the YouTube channel and you've not logged onto the Discord, I really recommend that you do. We have a Minecraft server, we have public forums to help people out, we've got places you can showcase your work, and if you're really lucky, you'll get lots of feedback and people testing your stuff. I have one more thing to showcase, and it really is a community showcase in this instance because I wouldn't have got it without the community that's developed around this channel. And YouTube saw fit to send me this early this year. Let me make sure I get that in the right place in the camera. For 100,000 subscribers. So this is really an award to all of us that take part and post things on the Discord server, watch the channel, subscribe on Patreon, follow on Twitter, all of those good things, and just make the place a very fun, educational and exciting place to be. And so finally, one big thank you from me. I think there'll be one more video this year and we'll do a live special at the end of the year just to celebrate what a great year it's been. But until then, take care.